Hello, everybody. As Amy said, I'm Sara Thomson. I'm the digital archivist at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm presenting today, introducing really, Anisa Hawes, who's a researcher and web archivist. And hello, Martin. I know you're watching. So, Vanished, preserving the Carmichael Watson project website offline using Web Recorder. This is a case study in using archiveweb.page and replayweb.page. And Vanished actually comes from the metadata in the back end of the UK Web Archives capture tool, ACT annotation and curation tool, and I just thought it was a very apt sort of metaphor for how we felt about this whole resource in general. So just a little bit of a background on this case study and what the web resource is that we captured offline. It is a project website around this Carmichael Watson project, and it was a project that took place in the University of Edinburgh heritage collections, looking after the papers of pioneering folklorist Alexander Carmichael. I can't remember off the top of my head where the Watson comes from, but Carmichael Watson is not in fact a person. And it's just this rich corpus of materials, mostly these notebooks, but other artifacts as well, that have stories and songs and customs and beliefs and artifacts from Gaelic-speaking parts of Scotland. So this project had a huge amount of grant funding, nearly £1 million between the Leverhulme Trust and AHRC, and the website was really about making these materials that were in our repositories, in our archives at the University of Edinburgh, more accessible to the wide-reaching, less accessible places across Scotland that were represented really in these collections. So lots of unique materials that were only in this website and not held anywhere else. And it was about having the significantly improved user experience, and as a result, it enjoyed a very popular, dedicated stakeholder group, if kind of specialized. So what happened? Why did we need to web archive this? So it was built around 2017 with project funding and then passed to our digital library team, represented by Pat here, if you want to give a wave. And unfortunately, it did not come with any further funding. So once the project funding was gone, there was no further resource to maintain this website. Unfortunately, the infrastructure that it was built on became very rapidly obsolete, and it became a security risk. The code could not be ported. I don't completely understand exactly why, except that whatever it was written in, this Grails framework, there's no in-house knowledge for how to migrate that to a different server. So ultimately, it was taken offline in 2018, very shortly after it went live. In the first place, it was moved to a virtual machine on Red Hat 5 that then itself became obsolete and was incurring annual license fees. So because that was also a security risk, it was secured behind a VPN. And basically, our IT infrastructure really just wanted to terminate it for very good reasons. So our aims were to get a sustainable set of archival materials in a preservation standard format, to make this web resource available in a meaningful way to these users that were so dedicated to it and used it so often in teaching, but also to have an opportunity to trial the preservation of web content within heritage collections at the university and to increase our capacity in web archiving. So why Web Recorder? So we chose archiveweb.page because we needed a highly accurate capture for a fairly complex website that could commence immediately. And we wanted to be able to use something like replayweb.page to provide access to users from our own local discovery systems. So why not something automated? This website, the Carmichael Watson project website, is in excess of 20,000 unique URLs. So it would have been fantastic to use something automated, but unfortunately for the reasons above, we were unsuccessful in finding an automated solution. And I'm going to hand over now to Anisa Hawes, who had the joy of... I'm sorry? Oh, no, sorry, I thought you were doing that. Okay. Would you like me to do it? Sorry. So just quickly, when Anisa and I first started collaborating, we agreed on a workflow that started at the point of appraisal and testing different types of methods to see what tools would work best. I put in a business proposal, and then Anisa did a really extensive scoping and initial mapping exercise. There's quite a lot of troubleshooting. I'm happy to talk about all of the different technical issues that we encountered along the way, that Anisa encountered along the way, but it is going to take far longer than we have for this presentation to go into all of those. But if you're interested in using archiveweb.page for something like this, we are happy to find you later and have a cup of tea and have just a bit of a rant about it in a productive way. And then coming to exporting, the capture that Anisa so expertly and accurately was able to perform, which also came with a few headaches. Again, happy to discuss that later. And then hopefully at the end of this presentation, I'll be able to show you where we are with it now. Is that okay?
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so when starting to build a web archive, my first task is to orientate myself within the website. And I think of this as a process of mapping, but one that goes much further and deeper than a sitemap. My aim is to determine the extent and the shape of a site's terrain so that I can plan the work ahead. I need to be able to identify any errors or gaps on the live pages so that I can distinguish errors in my capture from those that are pre-existing. I also want to be able to map any inconsistencies or complexities that might hinder my capture or limit its eventual fidelity. Only by interacting with a website and clicking page to page can I observe where menus intersect and how the URL correlates to my position, then changes when I perform specific gestures. These observations are key because capture with archiveweb.page involves visiting each page, performing each gesture and each click that you want researchers to be able to revisit and re-perform in the future. In the case of Carmichael Watson, this process of mapping became closer to an excavation through which I discovered a non-standard complexity in the site's underlying architecture. So I was noticing multiple URL sequences running in parallel, in some cases identifying between 6 and 10 different sequences intersecting a single record. I found several sequences of pages that are exact duplicates, except from their URL. Despite that fact, despite the fact that these were otherwise identical pages, all the sequences would need to be captured to facilitate anything like intuitive browsing through the archive. To understand URL patterns within a website, I plot out pathways and explore. In Carmichael Watson, I found that the pathways I followed didn't resolve as I expected. So I navigated from the catalogue hierarchy to an object record, then from a subject index to the same object record, then from a genre index to the same object record again. But these three routes through the site didn't lead me to the same destination page. Rather, I noticed that each of the URL paths retained a reference of the journey I'd taken, or more technically, they contained the query that had produced them. That meant maintaining the indexes as functional discovery tools in the archive would involve capturing all possible user journeys from each of the entries in the indexes to every record they reference. But this collection comprises around 4,500 index entries, variously associated with more than 3,000 catalogue records, with some individual index entries referencing close to 1,000 records on their own. So, following all possible paths or evoking all possible queries simply wasn't practicable. and the size of the archive would have become inflated to contain thousands of what would be effectively duplicate pages. Instead, the sensible solution was to make some decisions about which pathways to follow during capture, so that those paths would be throughways in replay, and which other paths not to follow, understanding that this meant some paths through the archive would lead to apparent dead ends. Annotations would be key to supporting navigation at the point of access. I've developed some guidance for staff and researchers at Edinburgh that combines step-by-step visuals with detailed annotations. My aim is to support their orientation within Replay Web's interface, point to differences in functionality between the live and archived websites, explaining the limitations of our interactions and, crucially, guiding meaningful pathways through the resource. This also includes identifying those paths that lead to the edge of the archive and sharing methods for searching Replay Web's built-in indexes to find those pages that appeared to have vanished.
So as you can see, it was really a very complex website to try and capture manually. But just one of the lessons that we learned is that currently there did not seem to be any other way about it. The bad news is that the resource was deleted. It has been terminated. The original website does not exist. However, we were able to save it, and the capture was successful. This is meant to be a big dramatic reveal. Ta-da! So this is, in fact, the Carmichael Watson website captured by Anisa, and we still have a really big job to do to communicate to our users what exactly a web archive is, step one, and then to communicate, as Anisa has described, the ways that you'll need to navigate it that aren't the instinctual way they would have interacted with the original resource just because of practicalities. But it was an absolute magical moment to be able to show this resource, particularly to the project archivists who spent years archiving this catalogue, transcribing these notebooks and all of these materials, and helping to get all the content ready for this website. So this is very exciting.
Don't click many of the indexes.
No, I'm not planning to. Anissa's like, don't click that, it won't work. But yeah, so I do just have to give a shout out to Pat, who's just sitting here at the front, who has built our locally hosted, as you can see here, replay.is.ed.ac.uk. The long-term goal is to be able to just provide a link in our catalogue or access systems so that users can just click on the link and be taken directly to the resource. So we still have some work to do, but I'm absolutely delighted with this, and I think it was really the best outcome that we could have hoped for. So with that, I'll take questions.
I think, yes.
Or do we need to sit down?
We have time for one? Yes, thank you. Yes. Thanks, Sara, Anisa, and Pat. And we'll have just a quick moment, see if there's any. Yes, one quick question.
Hi, yeah, that sounds like a good and interesting project, but it also sounds quite a lot of work. I wonder if you have any idea how that compares with the amount of extra work that could have been done in the first place to think about long-term viability of the resource and not require you to go digging around in it afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Are we recording the questions? Yes, I think one of the important, I didn't sort of put this in the formal aims, but certainly within the archives team, it's important for us to leverage this to show how important it is to ask those questions at the beginning and trying to come up with a set of guidance. I'm trying to move away from these bespoke project websites and just to have a platform that better supports interacting with digital resources, so that it's not required to build this extra website that is more intuitive for users. But absolutely, but that's a really big sort of cultural change at the university and a big sort of advocacy job. But we now have this to show and to kind of illustrate what we're going on about digital preservation and sustainable development. And it's not Pat we're trying to convince. So we've got a really good team of library developers particularly helping us with that as well. There's one more question. Oh, maybe two more. Do we need to just wait until the end for those?
We'll just do it now, but we'll
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much. This was a great presentation. I'm wondering whether you're planning to, I'm sure that this is the only project website that's sort of living on borrowed time, whether you're planning to use this as an example to try and do the same work with other websites, or whether you're looking at other kind of reclamatory measures to ensure that those websites can retain access even after their infrastructure is obsolete.
It's unlikely that we will put this amount of effort into any of the 111 other project websites currently in a similar situation. This one had probably the largest amount of unique content that didn't exist anywhere else, which was the main motivator. And again, you just can't substitute for a really strong stakeholder group. So those researchers, lecturers who actually used the website in teaching helped us to make the argument for why we needed to preserve the website like this. So for others, I suppose if the creators and custodians of those websites were to be able to find the funds to do the work, then we would certainly facilitate that. But it's unlikely we would be able to spend this amount of resource on all of those other 111 project websites.